Okay, so we were wrestling. We were wrestling as to who was going to go on first and second, right? So I grabbed each one of these guys by the balls, and
He does fight dirty.
that wasn't dirty. So here we are, Elliot.
Elliot, the moderator.
Elliot, the moderator. That's what he's known at home as. No, dear, I don't want to do that. Children, this is the way we're going to go, right? Elliot, the moderator.
It's eerily accurate the way you're describing it.
Eerie.
I warned you not to bring him out.
So what we're going to do is we're going to... I actually, being kind of a Star Trek fan myself, I had a couple questions I wanted to ask you, gentlemen, before we get into the audience Q&As. I've been asked to not ask really personal questions.
Get on with it, Elliot.
So that means if I can't ask him, no one else can. All right? I'll cut you off if that happens. But I'm just curious, before we get into Star Trek, each of you are known for a lot. And I just have to know. First, Scott?
Yes?
Where's Sam Beckett now? Did he ever make that leap home?
He's still out there putting right what once went wrong. And believe me, there's a lot of work to do.
No?
Especially in wheat.
Mr. Shatner.
Yes.
If I may ask,
Yes, moderator.
In your own head, in your own mind, what
Yes.
are Denny and Alan up to these days?
Trying to do something with the DNA of wheat. Well, that seems eerily nonsensical, right? But in fact, it harkens back to a discussion that Scott and I were having about the DNA of wheat and how it's been misused and how we have fed the world the wrong kind of wheat and how we can't get back because there's no more real wheat. And that's what I've been dealing with.
And Mr. Brooks, I'm going to put this as delicately as I can.
Hurry.
Because
Yes.
I saw The Captains. How many of you here saw The Captains? Great film where Mr. Shatner interviews all the other captains in the franchise. And Mr. Brooks, honestly, did you have anything to drink before he showed up or something? Because you looked really happy at that point. Okay, I want to change my question.
You're in deep shit now. When you get that look, moderation is not an option.
All right, into the real questions here. Each of you have...
May I add, though,
by all means.
Yes.
that this man gave one of the great interviews
He did.
of our time.
Yes.
And it was unique, and it was solely him, and it was beautiful.
I really,
Not to mention all the music. Let's not forget
Yes.
that
Let's not
also.
forget the music.
May I ask you two to do another duet? I was hoping for You Don't Bring Me Flowers.
Scott, let's get on with it.
He's talking about you and Avery. What do you...
I know, but the audience is like, there's a puzzled look on their face.
None more so than
to-
mine.
Right? We
I'm
should
just really
turn
scared
it
of
over.
Avery right now.
Yeah. Well, you should be. And I'm going to sick him on you if you're not getting. And when I say sick, I mean sick.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh, I know. You gentlemen have had some storied careers in and out of the Star Trek franchises, and you've all been part of the franchise through different periods of its development. I'm wondering if any of you had some sort of reflections that you'd like to share about how it was. I know, Scott, you were technically at the beginning of the story and yet at the end. How did it feel, when Enterprise came to an end?
When Enterprise came to an end, we were saddened. We were disappointed, obviously. We felt we'd really kind of hit our stride the last 2 seasons, especially. But I would never have taken the job if I had to follow these other fine captains into the franchise world. The only reason I took it was because I didn't have to follow them. I was 100 years ahead of them. Now, that doesn't, if you really think about that, it doesn't make sense. But actors have funny ways of making things work for themselves. And that worked for me. It was like, oh, good, I don't have to study up. I can just go out and roll the dice and let it happen. So I was thrilled to be a part of it. I'm still thrilled to be a part of it. And the icing on the cake has been to get to know these gentlemen and Patrick and Kate over the last few years. We're all uniquely different, and yet we all kind of held the same job. And it's just been a true joy.
Mr. Brooks, with Deep Space Nine, you had there was a lot of pressure on you guys to kind of continue the legacy that was established by Next Generation, because you were also competing with Voyager, but a lot was said by the Star Trek creative team that the themes and the way that Next Generation was done would reside within Deep Space Nine. I mean, how do you feel the show was developed during your tenure?
Well, I think from what I understand about the people who created it, it was a challenge because to some great extent it was very different than anything that had gone before. Certainly that it was character driven, that there were so many people to take care of weekly, that in fact it looked more like the way we are than a projection and allegory about the 24th century and the subjects that we had to address, how we are, what we haven't fixed. And so to some extent, I think that the challenge was to get the people to care, especially about Cisco, because he didn't want to be there. You see what I mean? So the challenge is, why should we care if he does not? So I think, though in some ways, because they took this turn, if you will, to discuss science fiction, and indeed, knowing that somebody's going to say, well, this is not the Star Trek I know. The fact that they were willing and talented enough to take that kind of turn was, I think, ultimately rewarding, in the sense that, the people still talk about the shows as much as they talk about, the original with Mr. Shatner. And that's the test of it, isn't it? Of, in some form or another, what is classic. And part of the test of classicism is who's talking about it. See?
Deep. I think.
Mr. Shatner, you...
Ellie, would you do me a favor?
Yes, sir.
Drag your podium back.
Back.
Just keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Right there. Let's go. Okay.
That works.
More.
A little more.
I'm out of his eye
A couple
line.
of inches more.
No, more.
Little more.
look,
Little
look,
more. Little
more,
more.
more.
Little more.
Oh!
Oh!
Bad.
There you go. There you go.
Perfect.
Jean-Luc fell down. Sorry.
What's Jean-Luc doing here, by the way? I mean, he ain't here.
He misses you.
Jean-Luc is running. and making a dive into the pool. Jean-Luc is drowning.
Okay, I'll have you know.
Yes.
That particular action figure belongs to a young woman in the crowd who, has another Jean-Luc action figure that was literally, I do not exaggerate, literally sent into space. Okay?
Really?
Yes.
What? Really? Oh, fantastic. I'm so pleased.
Now the other Jean-Luc has now taken a dive courtesy of William Shatner. Okay, Mr. Shatner.
What is it?
You being at the start of the franchise also
I started the franchise.
Yeah, you've
I started a franchise.
It's true.
You don't want to get in on it, right?
But you've kind of become like the chronicler.
I'm the chronicler.
Everything that's gone. You're doing all these movies about fandom, about the,
Yep.
the characters,
Yep.
the actors.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, hey, who died and left you, the chronicler?
I can't take it any longer.
Try a little mouth to mouth on Jean-Luc.
He's alive.
I don't know. They've got Scott, they've got a photograph of you with your mouth on the figure there. God knows what they're going to do with that photograph. Unable to contain himself, Scott.
But the question being, I mean, what made you come to the conclusion? Hey, you know what? I think it's time for me to start putting all this together. Let's put it. Is this a retrospective you want to have for everyone, or was this like a personal thing for you?
Well, I don't know. I was making documentaries, and I enjoyed the process of exploration, which is what a documentary is. I mean, unless I suppose there are films that you can make with having a conclusion, having a preconceived conclusion, but I had none. I didn't know where I was going. It's like writing a story or writing an article. You don't know where you go, so you do your due diligence, and finally the story begins to expose itself. So I had this idea: what do the 5 actors have in common, and what do they have not in common? And it began to grow. And then about the 3rd day into shooting, I began to understand what the documentary was about. In the same way with Get a Life, I asked the question some years ago, who comes to conventions? Who are you people, and why are you here? And my immediate answer was, well, they've come to see me. And so then I wrote a book in which I concluded, no, they didn't come to see me, they came to see each other. I thought, wow, how smart I was. What an observation. They came to see each other, of course. But then when I did the documentary and delved further into it, it became so interesting that I was astonished as to why we're all here and what you people are doing here. You don't even know what you're doing here, but you really are doing something really special. And that's the documentary, which was a voyage of discovery. And that's what fascinated me in the end. The voyage of discovery, each one of these guys and actors, we spent, in some cases, a couple of days, in some cases, a day with each other, and in those moments bonded, because I was asking them questions about their soul, and because of for one reason or another, mostly because we're peers, and I was not out to harm or do something salacious, but really vitally interested in who they were, they responded and gave me their their moment, and it was reflected in the film. So, in some strange manner, these guys are my friends, and I haven't known them very long, but I feel great warmth and great kinship with them, as well as the other two that aren't here. It's astonishing, and so that was the reason for doing those documentaries. And now I've got the bit in my mouth, if you'll excuse the horse expression. Go ahead. And I'm running off with the idea that I'm making documentaries and I'm exploring various things, and that's really what I'm after.
Now, we have a microphone set up in the middle of the room there. If you had a question you wanted to pose to our esteemed captains, again, I'll ask that you please refrain from asking about anything personal. And don't do a repeat of that SNL skit where you're telling Mr. Shatner about the birth of a foal in his stable that even he doesn't know about. So.
Did you hear what he just said? I mean, did you register what he just said?
I'm really in trouble with you, aren't I?
Hi. First off, Mr. Shatner, I'd like to let you know I fought to get Star Trek on the air in Nashville in 1966 when they had a country music showcase show up on September 1st saying that our audience couldn't handle it. We fought for it. We called the station. I talked to the station manager every day. I was 11.
No kidding. That's wonderful.
Okay.
And you were just a kid.
I was a kid.
You were a kid filled with passion.
Yes, and I was at the only integrated high school. It was a Catholic high school. All the other high schools were still segregated.
For God's
and
sakes.
I organized a multiracial coalition that got Star Trek on the air.
Unbelievable.
He owes you a lot of money.
And as a man of a certain age, I will take it.
If I had it, I would give it to you.
We'll negotiate. But my question actually is for Professor Brooks. Don't you feel that you're owed some money for the character Nick Fury's attire for a man called Fury in the Avengers? I mean, he's got your look from A Man Called Hawk down pat, Samuel L. Jackson. I mean, when you really think about it, don't you really think that Professor Brooks should get money for that character that they kind of dress like him?
Don't think of it as personal.
It did kind of feel that way, though, didn't it? No.
Okay.
Well, I would tell you why. You see, this character Hawk, which lives in the universe that Robert Parker created in the Spencer for Hire novels. Yeah. Now, this was the first incarnation of that character, Spencer for Hire. So I will tell you simply that this was a quote from the culture. See what I mean? All from literature, from the legend, from mythology, and all of that. Imam Baraka might call him a blues hero. That's exactly who he was. That you could turn the page and he's there, you turn the page and he's gone. He appears on the screen in the night wearing dark glasses and can see. He's carrying a Colt python, a nickel-plated 8-inch barrel Colt python. And you can't tell that he has it until it's out. You see? When something happened to Spencer, then there he was. That is the stuff of myth and legend. That is a hero in many ways. If in fact some years hence that someone wants to delve into contemporary mythology in that fashion, no pun intended, then we have done the correct thing. and letting everybody know that it's possible.
Yeah, baby.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I meant the question humorously, but I do think that Nick Fury is modeled after Hawk.
Hi there.
Hello.
My question is actually for the three of you. I was wondering what some of the challenges and sacrifices were in the acting career.
What challenges and sacrifices we made?
Yeah.
You mean other than appearing with the other two people? What's that? Oh. That's a broad question. And come to think of it, it's about a broad, too. That was one of the challenges.
Don't look at me.
Well, no, well, she's
It was
addressing
the
the three of us.
only
What?
question I could think of.
Okay.
You go.
Why are you looking at me?
Well, we're all looking at you.
I want Avery to answer all of my questions from now on. I'm just going to defer to him for. You take this one, Avery.
Okay. You know what? I'll tell you this way. If in fact, and I don't mean this about anyone, from the moment that we watched people sit on a couch, you know, with a moderator or a host, and talk about what they had done. Oh, let's look at the clip. And then in dim light, and of course we don't see the clip as the audience sitting in there does it. But you know, and then they ask this person, so tell me how that was. Well, the fact of the matter is that you could say anything. This is one of the only places, it seems to me, you know, in the only professions or realities where you really don't know whether that person is telling the truth or not. It's true. Now, watch this. However, the cost of deciding to be before people whom you've never met and may never ever meet again, the cost of that is what you're going to have to live with. You see what I mean? Because if it doesn't cost you anything, then you're not going to believe it anyway. You see what I mean? So then when you start to talk about what the challenges are, you really have to talk about what the cost is. You know, to seek telling the truth, even if nobody believes you. Even if you may not be telling the truth at all. That's the dare. That's the risk, and therefore the challenge every time you do it. Okay?
I gave up being a brain surgeon. And that's the truth.
He gave it up twice. You really gave it up. Yeah. Because they tried to pull him back in. Please, Mr. Shatner, please stay and be a brain surgeon.
But no, they
I thought
pulled
about
me
it.
back in.
Two clowns and an intelligent man.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I think there's a play there somewhere.
Right, waiting for the clown, I guess. Oh dear. Well, it's your turn.
Well, look, everything that Avery said, that I understood, I agree with. But actually, what Avery says almost always is very simple and very understandable. But you have to listen, which is not, we're not all good listeners anymore. I will say that the reward is the exchange. And people always ask me, what do you like more, theater, television, movies? And I always say theater, because the exchange, the shared moment that can never happen ever again, this moment right here will never be alive again on this planet. And if we can take those moments as they come to us every day of our lives, and find a way to dive into them and appreciate them, then that's the reward for me. That's why I like to do what I've done and why I've gone along with the sacrifices, because I get something back, and it's something that I needed in my life. So you get in the boat and you paddle out into the ocean. And so I'm always grateful to have this exchange, whether it be here with all of you, in a theater where you're exploring, and I feel extremely lucky in my journey that I've had these kinds of opportunities.
Thank you.
Hi, I just want to first of all say that I was watching Deep Space Nine one time, and my dad walks in the room, and he's like, Captain Sisko's doing something, and he thought what Captain Sisko was doing in the episode was kind of dumb, and he was like, who is this guy? He's not, whatever, and he didn't really care much for it. And then a couple months later, he realized something. He said, wait a minute, that's Hawk? Oh, no. Hawk was cool. Hawk would kick this guy's ass. So that's been like a debate for the last year of mine between my dad and I.
Dude, this guy punched Q in the face. I don't know if Hawk would have punched Q in the face.
Well, I told Dad that, I said Sisko kept the Dominion on the other side of the line for, however long, and Dad said, look, Hawk would have said, hey, Dominion, come over here. So that's that story. But anyway, my question is actually for Mr. Shatner, because the other two of you guys, by the time you guys came on to Star Trek, it was kind of Star Trek already. But for Mr. Shatner, like when your agent handed you this thing, it was like, yeah, there's this TV show in space, and your shirt comes off a lot, and whatever, Before Star Trek became Star Trek, before you even became part of Star Trek, what were your thoughts on what you were doing? What did you think? Oh, this is just a silly thing, or how'd that go on?
Well, I was asked to be in the second pilot, and they had made a pilot with Jeffrey Hunter, and it didn't sell to NBC, but NBC was intrigued enough with the idea that they wanted to shoot another pilot. So Roddenberry called me. I was not in Los Angeles, but I went to Los Angeles to see the pilot they had made. And I was intrigued by the pilot. I'd been fascinated with science fiction prior to that, and had read many of the authors that ultimately I met while doing the show. But I thought it was an intriguing show, and I thought maybe the execution of that pilot they took themselves a little too seriously, I thought. A group of people aboard a ship for years are not shaking each other's hands all the time or being very formal. So I suggested, that may have been my contribution to Star Trek, suggested a lighter approach, and that's what we did, making the second pilot, which sold. And I thought it was a great idea. I had been reading science fiction, intrigued by the exercise of imagination, especially by the lure of knowing that you're on Earth for 70, 80 years if you're lucky, and the things that evolve during that time are enormous, especially in this age that we're in. But what would it be like 200-300 years from now? Think back, 1700. What was it like in the 1700s of the 20th century? It's enormous, and we won't be here, but we can imagine what it might be like, and that's the intrigue of science fiction. Will man get better? Will man be here? Will technology take over? Will we find the lure of technology an abomination, and we want to go back to the simple life? Will we get the old wheat back and not the new? That kind of thing. That's the lure. That's the lure of science fiction, and I understood it completely. So when I did the show, I was thrilled to be doing this kind of thing.
Thank you.
Hello, William. I'm extremely happy to be here. I've been a big fan of Star Trek since you guys came on the air in the 60s. My question is, what was it like to be working on the set with such a wonderful cast of Star Trek?
This is certainly the making of film, among other things, but we know that is a gregarious activity. You cannot do it alone at all. And the fact that in each case, in this tradition of Star Trek, it seems to me that the folks, the creators, the visionaries, et al., have been very, very careful and thoughtful about assembling a set of people, both before and behind the camera, who know what they're doing and who care about what their craft means, and more importantly, care about each other as human beings, because you can't work that long, for that many years, that many hours, without caring about who's next to you, and making sure, thus, that you give as much as you can get.
Thank you.
Are we all answering this question? No, listen, it was, we came in very quickly on the heels of Voyager, and we were quickly handed their crew, who are legendary in the business. And I was astounded by the quality of craftsmanship and the amount of technology and the cutting edgeness of that environment was wonderful. And we kind of fit in to kind of a well-oiled machine because of where we fell in happily. And the good news was we had, again, echoing Avery, a lovely group of actors for me to play off of and with, and I felt like we improved because it is a learning experience as you go along each episode, each year, and but it was completely beautifully supported by some of the most creative minds that exist in television, and groundbreaking visionaries that, the Michael Westmore and the years that he put into it, from the makeup and that end of it, and the camera people, and always on the cutting edge of, well, we're going to do this, we're going to switch to HD. We flipped to HD before everybody was even doing it, and trying to, pushing the boundaries there. All of our effects people, everybody was just first rate. So we were, honored to be in that group, but that was something that was just cultivated over the years that we got handed, and we were very fortunate, and we had I felt very blessed to have such a good bunch of actors around me all the time, and we can never forget the supporting cast that come on and put on the heads and the tails and the paint and the hours before we would ever get there. I'm always bumping into people. Don't you remember me? I was the third Klingon from the right when you were on trial and in the ice planet and the thing. I was like, no, I had never saw your face. Are you kidding me? But those people also are a huge, as you all know, are a huge part of the fabric of, and they were who we worked with. They were, it wasn't just the people on the ship. It was the people the guests who came on that supported the dream and the vision. And that was, I have so many wonderful memories about all those people also. Now you.
Well, I particularly loved George Takei. I had a deep fun. The truth of the matter is that I loved a lot of the people there, but I got really fond of Leonard Nimoy. He became a real friend, a brother, and loved him. Made a great friend out of that, and from that point of view, the relationships that were cemented by the many hours that we spent together is a very definite aspect of shooting a series like that.
Thank you very much, and for a great franchise.
I think we only have time for like 2 more questions.
Oh my gosh. Hardly seems fair.
To Avery Brooks. I was wondering, from the Deep Space Nine, did you like baseball as much as you did in Star Trek?
I came to love it after Michael Piller said, Cisco loves baseball.
Hello? Hello? Okay.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello.
I, like many of everybody else here, have grown up with Star Trek and have found it very influential in my life. Each one of you represent a stage of my life as a role model in a way as much as my father, my grandfather, and everybody else. And now I'm submitting going for my doctorate. So, I mean, that's kind of, science and professional and everything else. Thank you. But as a fan, do I look to you and put too much onto you as a custodian of Star Trek, since I think Star Trek was at best when it was on TV? I like the new movie and the next movie that's going to come out, but to me, Star Trek was best when it was on TV, and you had such an interpersonal reaction and interaction with one another. And now that it's not on TV anymore, you are now the custodians for what we look to and thrive off of. Is that fair as you as actors, and is that fair of us to expect that from you? I asked a good question, didn't I?
Well, you got a doctorate.
That's a heavy question. Here comes the heavy answer.
You know, this is true because I can't, the latter part of your question, I don't know that I'd ever be able to begin to enter, into an answer. But this, is what I discovered long ago. But that, and I've said it often in many ways, that the power and indeed the glory of this we call Star Trek resides in you. There's the power. That's what makes it make sense. Scott talked about, the reward in the engaging and the exchange. But indeed, without you, then this moment, as he talked about, doesn't happen. And therefore, I am not fooled to believe that although I'm a part of something that is enormous and has been going on for decades, I know where the power it is, and it's in you.
In a way, we are the custodians, in that we have a history that you don't have, of the actual making and the writing and the definition of Star Trek. So we are, in that way, custodians, and it's these documentaries that I've been making, and I'm attempting to make a third on the Next Generation, are by way of saying, this is what I think happened, spoken from the mouths of the people who were there. And it is the mutuality of meeting like this, with you asking questions and us trying our best to answer the question, sometimes lightheartedly and sometimes with deeper meaning, to sustain this ritual that we go through here. We're doing our mythological best right now. We are in a process of renewing ourselves and renewing Star Trek and renewing the message of Star Trek every time we meet. So we will meet again, and we'll have other things to say, and you'll have other questions to ask, and we will do our best as custodians to have this interchange.
Follow that.
Like I've always said, I wanted to be on his ship.
Go, fast. Don't let.
400 years ago, Shakespeare wrote for the common, for the masses. Star Trek in the 20th century, of course, is the equivalent in terms of popular entertainment. Back then, only the words could survive because the media only allowed the words, not the performances. Thanks to the 20th century technological developments, we can now carry on throughout history, not just the words, but also the performances. Now, Shakespeare is endowed with a degree of immortality because of that. And each of you is now endowed with that same immortality. Just as 400 years later, we still remember Shakespeare, 400 years from now, we're going to remember William Shatner, Avery Brooks, Jonathan Archer, Scott Bakula, Captain Kirk. Anything you look at, you're going to be remembered 400 years from now. Because Star Trek is, despite what the naysayers will claim, Star Trek's not dead, it's not going to die. It's going to be alive a long time. Do you ever... Do you ever reflect on that immortality that you have gained and will possess throughout history? And how do you react to it when you think about it?
Be careful. What'd you say? What did you say? Yeah. Be careful what you wish for.
I thought we should have closed with my last speech.
So did I. So did I.
But
All right. I'm sorry.
Felix up.
I've got to get to the redhead. I'm sorry. I got to give her a chance to, and she'll be the last one.
All right, my question goes to Mr. Shatner. Me and all my sisters love enjoying the show. We all flew down here from Canada to see you.
Oh boy.
And many times...
From Windsor?
No.
Just across the bridge, right?
Newfoundland.
Oh, okay.
It's often left off the map. This is my big question because I've always wondered this while we're watching the show and enjoying it. I mean, you look at an episode like Plato's Stepchildren. You're being ridden like a pony, slapping yourself in the face. And, or you look at something like The Voyage Home, you guys on the bus, putting the rocker to sleep. I mean, you guys must have just busted out at some point. You know, you guys must have just looked at each other, said, what are we doing? You know, wrestling with the Mugatu or the Gorn. Would you share some of the moments with us where you guys just roared? What episodes did you guys find trouble getting through?
Every single one of them. Thank you and good night.
Give her
Get her thing back. Make sure she gets this. Okay. Patrick's in the shot. Right. I'll take care of Patrick. Where's Patrick? Look over there, dude.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.